Yo, what is up guys, Grim here, and in today's video we're going to be covering some pretty big changes coming to the release of Star Rail, namely balance changes to some of the most powerful characters and underpowered characters in the 5-star roster. We're going to be discussing this from a theory crafting and endgame perspective, but also we're going to be talking a little bit about how much value these characters now have or lose on release if you were to get them as your primary 5-star. Characters we're going to be covering are Bronya, Welt and Himeko. Now, of course, we're going to be going into quite a bit of in-depth stuff here, but I'm going to do my best to give you guys the laydown here of exactly how powerful these characters should be now on release. So for the TLDR, Bronya has lost a playstyle, but she likely will still be the best 5-star that you could get on release if you're looking very, very long term. Welt has seen a massive increase in his viability due to the fact he can now be played as a dedicated support and bring damage to the team instead of just utility. And Himeko has been made much smoother to play and can now play by herself, where previously she needed to be paired with another fire unit to get the most out of her kit. So if I had to describe, I'd probably say Bronya is neutral, no changes really. Maybe very late game she has been nerfed slightly, or one of her options has been taken away. Welt has seen a pretty major buff here, and then Himeko has also seen a pretty major buff. Now let's get into the details, because that's just the short of it. What exactly has changed? Well, let's get into it. All these changes will be listed down below in a link. You can take a look at the Pride One link, which is what I'm looking at right now. And there's also the official miHoYo socials here who posted all these changes, which I'll also link as well. But this is in Chinese, so unless you can translate that, you probably want to go with the Pride One. All right, let's get into it. So Bronya, what has changed? What am I meaning about this? So Bronya had 3 playstyles which she could adopt. She could be played as a skill point generator to fuel the team and give them basically infinite skill points, which she still can do. She could also be played as a massive buffer, someone who could enable a character to really scale their damage out of control using her skill. But then in the third way, she could be played as a dedicated damage dealing unit herself by using her skill on herself. And she could also, while doing that, also buff the entire team as well. And then later on the line, when you get her Eidolons as well as her Premier Light Cone, she can also do all of that while generating skill points. Now the third one, as you could hear there, is going to be really busted later and later on. The further you go in the end game, and the more Eidolons you got on Bronya and the more gear you got on Bronya, the more and more busted the third one would become. So much so that, in my opinion, the entire game would have been warped around the third version of Bronya, where she becomes this out of control DPS who is also a support at the same time. Now, miHoYo seem to be really on top of their balancing here, because they have identified that and they have removed it. You can no longer do the third variation of Bronya, and that has been removed. So if we take a look here at the exact change, her skill has been altered and a new line of text has been added. It says that if the skill is used on Bronya, it will not trigger the action is advanced forward by 100% part. So essentially what this means is you can no longer turn Bronya into a DPS, and you can no longer scale her out of control once you get her Eidolons and her Premier Light Cone. So that has been removed as a playstyle. So it leaves the remaining 2 playstyles. So Bronya was in a tier of her own. She was that strong and her potential was that insane in the very long term. What has changed? Well, in my opinion, Bronya is still in a tier of her own, and she is, in my opinion, still the best long-term investment from the standard banner 5-stars if you were to pick any of them, as she is got the potential to really enable a lot of teams, and she is part of the strongest team composition in the game, the hyper carry composition. Let's talk a little bit more about that. So Bronya's teams right now generally consist of a character who wants to be the focus of everything, the star of the show. So if you're considering a Sele team or a Jingyuan team, you're absolutely going to want Bronya on your account, as she is a pivotal piece in making that team work. The team consists of Bronya, a hyper carry target, which is either going to be Sele, Jing, Clara, or maybe Himeko. We'll get to that in a second here. But those are pretty much the 4 at the beginning. Maybe you can also use Sushang for this, but the best ones are Sele and Jing. You have Bronya, you have Tingyang, and then you will have a healer. Any healer will work. Natasha or Bailu, we'll just put Bailu there because I found it first. So the way this team will work is that Sele will basically gobble up the entire team's skill points. Tingyang will be played as a neutral character where she will use her skill and then basic skill and then basic on Sele, and then Bailu will be healing quite a lot, I would imagine, and using basics. So the entire team in terms of skill point generation lies on Bronya to fuel Sele, because Bailu will be using her own own skill points for herself. Tin Young uses her own skill points for herself. So who's giving Sealy the fuel? Bronya. Now, Bronya is a massive machine when it comes to generating skill points. In the basic spam Bronya, which is a skill point focused build, she can generate 18 skill points in 8 turns and perform 5 ultimates. Now, if you're curious, Sealy requires 14 skill points with Eidolon 1 with her increased speed boost. So she can single-handedly fuel Sealy all by herself, while also buffing Sealy for the majority of her rotation as well. So Bronya is still an insane support, and she single-handedly makes this team work. Without her and another support which doesn't attack as frequently, the team doesn't really work. You would have to maybe make Tin Young kind of use more basics. Bailey wouldn't be able to get to heal as much. Something would have to go, but Bronya really does make this team work. Now, it's a little bit less restrictive with Jing 1 because he doesn't use as many skills, but overall, Bronya will also be fantastic with Jing. And the reason for that is that all of those excess skill points she's generating with the basic spam build can be immediately funneled into Jing using her skill to give him even more skills. He'll also get damage increases. He'll get more Lightning Lord stacks, and overall, this team will work just fantastically for that as well. Another good team is with Clara. Clara is one of the better hyper carry targets at the start. If you can't get an event banner character, she is one of the better ones, and Bronya is also very good with Clara. Overall, this is going to be a pretty standard lineup, these kind of two together, and if you don't have Bronya, you're missing half of the equation there. So Bronya is still very good. She still works on all the teams she did before. She's just a little bit less broken in the very, very, very long term. So in my opinion, Bronya is still on a tier on her own, unless they like seriously nerf a lot of her other values or like nerf her advanced action forward a ton. They would have to literally half it to make her bad. She's still going to be by far probably the best Harmony character right next to Tin Young. They're a little bit different in the way they work, but she's insane. Bronya is very good. All right, next up is Welt. Now, Welt, my boy, he was a little bit on the back burner. In terms of the actual theory crafting behind him, over in theory crafting land, he wasn't a very big fan favorite. He was kind of a little bit towards the bottom of the list. And the reason for that is because he didn't bring any damage. And the most difficult mode in the game is Forgotten Hall. And Forgotten Hall asks you to deal as much damage as possible, as fast as possible. And the secondary objective is to make sure you survive while doing that. Now, the surviving part you can solve reasonably easy. The damaging part is actually quite tough. And Welt didn't bring any damage. He brought the defense, but not really any damage. He could kind of bring his own damage, but then he wouldn't be generating as many ultimates, and he wouldn't be doing his job as well as he otherwise would be. He was kind of in this weird scenario where he didn't really have a game mode made for him yet, and you know, he wasn't going to be very good in the ultra endgame of 1.0. Well, they've added a change to Welt. So you can see here that he has got a new trace. He has lost a bit of damage himself, so he's no longer going to get 25% increased ultimate damage, but instead he's going to get a new buff. And this buff is going to allow him to apply a debuff when using his ultimate, which will cause enemies to take an increased amount of damage. Now, the cool thing about this is we've seen this before. We know exactly what this is. If you take a look at Welt in CBT3, he actually has this effect already on him. It's actually his Eidolon 4. It's got the exact same wording. Now, if I had to hazard a guess, because Mihoyo are so on top of exactly what the balance needs, and it seems like they know exactly what's going on, I would hazard a guess to say that they probably just took his Eidolon 4 and moved it to one of his traces. Because the wording is identical, I would say that that is probably what they've done, and we're going to assume that that is the case. So if we assume that this Eidolon 4 is exactly this trace, because it has exactly the same wording, does this change Welt's position? Well, in my opinion, yes. It actually adds a massive amount of value to Welt. Before he was a defensive support, now he's a defensive support as well as an offensive support at the same time, which is a really, really big buff. So the reason that this is so good though is if you read the exact wording, the way that this damage is actually applied is actually as a modifier on the enemy, which makes them take more damage. What this essentially means for everyone is that this is going to be a true 12% more damage. So you can take however much damage you're going to deal before, and then with the Welt debuff on them, just multiply it by 1.12, baby. So it's way better than other damage multipliers, is the TLDR. So it's pretty good. Overall, Welt is going to be a much, much better support now, and he finally brings what the endgame demands, which is more damage for the team. So I can absolutely see Welt being a pretty decent pickup on the 7 of the standard characters, and he definitely definitely rises, in my opinion, in his viability. Overall, he does have some pretty stiff competition though. In the short term, he's got Pella to compete with. We don't know what changes are coming to Pella, but you know, he does definitely compete now. He's definitely much better defensively than Pella, but you know, okay, she probably brings a little bit more damage than him right now, but now it's a comparison. Whereas Pella just brought damage and Welt didn't, now he brings a bit and he can kind of hold a candle there. So if you're looking for a hybrid approach of damage and defense, Welt is definitely the best Nihility unit now in the game. So he's pretty interesting, pretty good. It remains to be seen exactly how it ends up playing in the endgame, but I think that Welt is much better now. He's received a massive buff, and if I got him now, I wouldn't be you know, too sad. I definitely would have a use for him, and he still does have that imaginary typing as well as all that defensive stuff going on for him, so definitely pretty good there. Third is Himeko. So Himeko, I don't think that she's so much gotten a massive damage increase. I kind of did a little bit of you know, a bit of theory crafting with this burn thing here, which we're about to talk about, and if I had to give you guys an estimate, I'd probably say it's about a 10% damage increase in single target and probably a 15 to 20% damage increase in AoE, probably closer to the 15%. Now, what was the change though? Okay, so first and foremost, what was Himeko's problem? Himeko has a trait called Magma, which allows her to deal increased damage to burned enemies. Now, the catch is that Himeko cannot actually apply burn herself. Well, she can, but not as a part of her normal rotation. Most characters in Star Rail, when they want to do their full damage, want to use their skill. Pretty much on cooldown every single time. It generates more energy, does way more damage, and you don't want to be using your basic attack. Now, she can apply a burn, but it's only on her basic attack, and that's not very good. You're not going to be using a basic attack on Himeko if you can avoid it. So this wasn't very useful, and if you wanted to apply the extra damage from Magma, you'd have to bring another character who could apply a burn, like Asta or Hook, and that really limited her potential to be like a really good character. Okay, so, well, she didn't have much flexibility here, and that sucked. Well, what they've done is they've basically taken that burn and made it apply to all of her skills. So literally all of her abilities now apply burn. Now, that is a massive deal because you no longer have to pair her with another burning character to get the maximum out of her kit. She can do it all herself. She's a self-enabler. And in addition to that, she's also going to more consistently apply burn on a single target, but all targets, which was not an option available to her before, meaning that a lot of her damage in single target will be a lot more consistent and a lot higher, but also on AoE, she's going to be applying burns to everybody. Now, if we take the values here that we see on the single target burn, if it's like 30% of her attack, which is what it is here, well, that's not going to be an insane amount more damage, but it will definitely help her out. As before, she wasn't really viable in applying a burn to everybody and able to enable her skill to deal maximum AoE damage, but now she can apply AoE burns. Her skill in AoE, her AoE damage is going to go up quite a good amount. So overall, I think this is a pretty big buff to Himeko. Is it going to change her role? Is she going to be a top tier S tier unit? Probably not. She's still going to be an AoE fire specialist, but she's going to do that role way better now. So if you have a fire situation or an AoE situation, Himeko is going to be a pretty damn good unit, and I actually wouldn't be too unhappy to pull her. It's also worth noting that Himeko is actually one of the best farming units in the game by a long shot. So having her on your account, leveling her up, it's going to feel good for farming, but now you can also easily bring her in Forgotten Hall and feel pretty good about it when the enemy is weak to fire. Now, her single target's probably not going to be insane. I don't think she's going to be dealing Cell A levels of single target anytime soon, or really ever, but she's definitely going to be pretty capable and pretty viable, I think. So overall, that's going to be what we got, guys, on the character front here. Some pretty damn good changes. I think that they have removed the outlier here, which was Bronya. She would have been way too game warping if they left her the way she was. The way she is now is still S tier or S plus tier, whatever you want to call it, and she is really good. Welt is pretty good now. I think he's a decent support. I think people are definitely going to use him quite a lot now in the end game, and you know, if he gets a mode in which he's really good with, or he goes with Silver Wolf in the future, I think he's going to be really good. So you know, I don't know if I would target him as your must-have 5-star, but he's definitely pretty good. I think Bronya definitely has some very good teams with her, whereas Welt is kind of an all-rounder, but Welt's pretty good. And then Himeko, if you pull her, do not despair. Is she good? If you really want her, yes, she is good now. I think she is much better than she was before. I mean, she's not going to do Jingwan numbers pretty much ever. In AoE, she's going to be competent though, and she's going to be one of the best in AoE for now. Hope you guys have enjoyed this video. If you want more up-to-date, cutting-edge theory crafting, as well as beginner guides for Star Rail, make sure to subscribe. There's plenty more on the way, especially for release. And of course, until next time, hope you guys have enjoyed. Cheers.